We had people not directly in the war. They were either too old or too young. So I think they just did war relief with the road grader stuff. And no sons. Oh yeah, they didn't have sons. That's right. But you can see what really looks different other than the pictures in this day and age are color. You know, that's the same picture, could be anytime. That's Oni in a relaxed setting. Let me think, I can't think how old she is there. And that's my grandmother. Another constant throughout 95 years at least is the playhouse. And anybody driving along the back road of Otter Park has probably seen our playhouse. Many happy hours have been spent in there as children were sent out there in the mornings while the moms finished up their chores. We certainly weren't allowed down at the lake without a supervision. So this is Pris and my mother Cindy, and they had elaborate things. They would set places for, we had real dishes, real little miniature furniture, and I enjoyed the same thing, as did my kids. The playhouse has been closed up for a few years because we don't have any little ones running around, but we are ready and waiting when the next generation starts to appear. The gardens. Now the gardens were a fixture for many decades, but alas, they have disappeared. Partly because nobody wants to take care of them and there's a lot of weeds.
No full-time gardener.
Well, that's part of it. We have no full-time gardener. But these two pictures represent 5 generations, and I thought I wanted to include them anyway. There's my mother helping her mother, and there's my mother grown up with her grandson. So once my mom kind of couldn't keep up with the garden herself, then they really started kind of disappearing. But maybe we can bring them back. Yard games. We have that empty lot in between the 2 houses, and we love playing all kinds of things. Croquet, 28, croquet. Now, currently, cornhole's kind of taken over from a lot, but everybody enjoys gathering in the evenings playing games. I included this theme that runs through. Anybody who was a child on Wawasee knows that you got buckled up in life jackets and it was hot and it was sweaty and you might have been crying and then your parents yelled at you and said you had to keep your life jacket on. So, you know, you had to include that. These guys look pretty squishy. This is my cousin Janny, who's over there. And this is my mother. But these kids all look pretty happy right now, especially my son Alex, who is either given up crying and just fell asleep or something. So the 50s started off on a good note. Good picture of Charlie. Yeah, he's looking kind of handsome there. That's my mom and dad. Actually, this picture was taken in these photos were in 1956. My mother is 16 and my father is 18. And I wasn't going to mention this, but I actually found the corresponding diary entry where my mom had gone out skiing. They went out with John Maurer that day. And it's written in her diary. My dad had come to visit. They were dating and on and on. But anyway, back to the 50s. It started off with a great time. The 50s were good. All the grandchildren, those 7 grandchildren, were teenagers. So they were out carousing at the root beer stand, at Waco, dancing, playing cards, going skiing, and having a lot of fun. They did not have any inkling, certainly at the beginning of that decade, that by the end of the decade, things would be very different and they would have lost all those other people, their grandfather and both mothers. So So I put this cards picture in here just because I love that photo and I had meant to write down who the names were of those other ladies besides my grandmother. It was one of the bridge club. Anne has shared with me some information about a local bridge club that I'd never heard of.
My daughter is here.
Oh, really? Oh, very interesting. So though that table's still there, it still kind of looks the same except for the curtains. This is my mother. Obviously, I don't know if she's giving my son a beer or she's just drinking a beer, but I hope she's teaching him to play poker or something. You know, what stays at the lake, what happens at the lake stays at the lake. At the end of the 50s, in 1959, we had our first family wedding at the lake. And that was my mom and dad who were married at the Episcopal Church. And then everybody walked down. for a reception at Oni's cottage and in the yard, despite the fact that my mom's mother had died just 4 months prior. I think about that now, and I just can't imagine how heartbreaking that must have been. But weddings continued to be a theme. In 1990, my cousin Jannie was married, and she is celebrating her 30th anniversary next month. It was the only wedding that I've ever been to where all the guests ended up in their bathing suits swimming at, 10 or 11 at night because it was at least 95 degrees. It was the hottest day ever. And just 2 years ago, Jannie's niece and Lori's daughter and Heidi's twin was married on the overlooking the lake. And then we have another upcoming a joint Deister-McCumber wedding. This is Allie and Wes, who got engaged last summer. This is Marty's daughter, and they will be married in the fall at the lake. So everybody, the themes just continue. So now we move into the 60s, and I entitled that Bottoms Up, basically because when I think of the 60s, I think of cocktails at my grandmother's house. She was now a widow, and she ran a tight ship. It was a time of tradition, formality, rituals, and you didn't stray from them. So every night at 5 o'clock, you had to show up on her porch, clearly dressed, in a tie, a jacket, earrings, the whole thing. And you had cocktails, you had appetizers. At 6 or 6:30, if you lived at the next door house, your mother had to rush you home, feed you something quick. They had a very nice meal at the Adams cottage that was served to them by other people, and somebody cooked it for them. But we had macaroni and cheese usually, because the mother at the next door cottage had to return for her bridge game that evening, which included whatever granddaughter or granddaughter-in-law was there. And my Aunt Joan, who I didn't mention earlier, but Joan and Joe Gray, if any of you know the Grays, or Matt Gray, that is Oni's niece. And she actually was orphaned in 1933, and Oni and Roy raised her. And then she ended up, after her husband was serving in the military, settling on Vater Park next to the Mowers, I think. And so she was always around for a fourth for bridge. So that was what was going on in the 60s. And here's my picture showing the cocktail parties. And this is a photo of Elise, another one of our links between, this is Elise Deister. Oh, and this is Aunt Joan that I was just speaking of. And that's Mary Jewel Duck, if anybody knows the Ducks down there. She would come down for a lot. But you can see they're always dressed up. And then we still do cocktails every night at 5, 5:30, 6, whenever we get out there. A little less formal, often in our bathing suits, sometimes inside, sometimes outside. And here's Pris and my cousin, Bill Rayner. That's the son of the really handsome guy who got Janet McCumber, not Irv. And he's pretty handsome too. Another fixture, certainly that hasn't been here since the 30s, but it has been here since 1963, is the slide. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room now will put 2 and 2 together if you realize we're the slide house. Our slide was given to Oni on her 80th birthday by her grandchildren. I'm pretty sure they didn't think she was going to use it. I think it was one of those gifts that they won for themselves and was kind of expensive at the time. They said, well, let's just give it to Oni for her birthday present, and then we'll get to use it. So they did, and it's still used. We appreciate Sudlow takes it in and out every year, stacks it on the bank. A couple years ago, Doug Anderson refiberglassed the whole thing. It's good as new for another 50 years. And of course, the sandbox. We have a very large sandbox. There are many people in the family that think that it should be filled in and covered over. I've resisted that because I am a historian kind of a person who wants to keep it going. And now when I see all these pictures that everybody has enjoyed the sandbox going back to the 30s, this is Oni with her little grandchildren that she made live in the house next door because they were noisy, but apparently she could play in the sandbox with them. This is Andy Ruddle and my brother David. And this is my sister and I. We're digging to China, actually. I remember that day.
We always thought we could.
Yeah, we thought we could get to. Oh, and this is a fancy contraption that Dick Ruddle invented. That's Dick and Bill and Andy. But see that little chair in the background? We have 3 flights that go up and down. And now we had old people, Oni, and a lot of pregnant ladies that were having trouble with the stairs. And Dick liked to tinker too. He was kind of a tinkerer. So he built that. Nobody was allowed to go on that chairlift unless you were pregnant, or you were Oni, or you were Dick. So you could hitch a ride with one of those people, but never could you go alone. No? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So anyway, we're keeping the sandbox. The 70s started. You can see we're getting a little bit more casual. This is the great-grandchildren generation. This is my generation. This is a bunch of us are here right now today. We look a lot younger there, I can tell you. That might have been the last time we wore a 2-piece suit, I'm thinking. But the 60s were fun. We had lots of, the 70s were very good. It was the 70s, what can I say? But this is what I think of when I think of the 70s. Lots and lots of water skiing, lots and lots of getting up super early in the morning to get out there when the lake is like glass. The Ruddle boys were clearly the best skiers of the bunch. I'm just going to say it right there. They learned from their dad on his hydrofoil. Although this was not too shabby a few years ago. That was me in my mid-50s. Didn't do very well last weekend. I didn't put that picture on here. Anyway, so that's what I think of in the 70s. Oh, wait, at the end of the 70s, 1977, Oni died. She was 96 years old, so it wasn't really a surprise to the family. She'd been coming out all these years. We, of course, were sad, but look, she lived a lot longer than anybody else in the family. So at that point, things changed with the houses. Oni left one house, the Brown house, to the Brown daughters, which was Pris and my mother, Cindy. And the Adams house was left to the McCumber kids, which were 5 siblings. And that leads us into how I'm making this titled Make a Wide Berth, which is just kind of mean we kind of had to rejuggle and figure out how we were going to handle these changes. Well, Pris and Dick Ruddle decided that they would decamp from the compound and move down to Waco, start another compound for their rambunctious crew, and give Dick all the space he needed for all of his contraptions and toys. The McCumber crew had a couple siblings that lived far away, and they only made rare appearances. So they went on the month-to-month system, and that seemed to work for them, which meant that my mother ended up with the Brown cottage, now called the Landman cottage. That was my mom's last name. So that was the beginning of the 80s. And of course, when we think of that, I put all these toys here. The 1980s, the end of the decade was when the Wave Runners first made an appearance. First, we had the, what were the jet skis with stand-up ones. Nobody in my family was going to try that. But we did hop on the Wave Runner bandwagon early on. And we had an early windsurfer. That's my husband in his very early days. He was probably trying to impress me. This was his first summer at the lake in 1983. He really had no idea what he was doing, but he was trying to act like a lake boy, I'm sure. We're looking for these kayaks. If anybody read that post on the Friends, these were stolen a couple weeks ago, right out from our pier in the middle of the night. So if you see those, let me know. I think there was nobody around this lake who took them. I think it was some interloper who came in and took them and left with them. But that's what I have for the 80s. And then, of course, relaxing on the pier. You know, looking at these pictures just never gets old. Many of us remember the canvas boathouses. They were a pain in the neck, but they were beautiful. These bathing beauties in the 40s. Oh, this is Janet McCumber right here, Irv. I can look at her. She looks like a model. She really does. And she's posing like a model. I mean, she really is glamorous. You really lost out there. But, yeah, I know. Sorry. It's still painful after all these years. I know. Oh, here she is again. This is her over here. She's much older here, but still pretty good looking. Anyway. Here's Oni, we love her sunglasses. She did manage to get down to the lake even, you know, in her 80s and 90s. It was great. And then now we're just much more relaxed. We just veg out there all the time. The one difference about relaxing on the pier is that in the olden days, we put all the chairs out every day and took them back to the shed every night. We never left anything out overnight. Now we have a few pieces of polywood, which we're going to have to be careful with, but I don't know why nobody ever thought to leave heavy furniture out on the pier a long time ago. That and umbrellas. We never had umbrellas, except for one apparently we had. My sister was very fair skinned, so maybe that's why the umbrella is there. So anyway, that's that. That takes us into the 90s. That's my mom. This is a few years, my dad died fairly young at the end of the 80s. And so, excuse me, in the 90s, my mom was getting a whole bunch of grandchildren coming left and right. And she actually started spending, excuse me, I'm not like that senator who's having that coughing attack. So she started spending really the majority of the whole summer out here. And my siblings and I would come and go and bring our kids and try to overlap and overwhelm her with new things. But the 90s were a great time. I was a little tired in the 90s. I had 3 kids, they were small. And that's why I placed this photo in here, because how I would get rid of my kids in the 90s, in them in the boat and whatever, we would send them out to catch some critters. And we had no problem putting life jackets on them, sending them down Vader Park, past the nunnery into the Turtle Channel to keep them occupied for a little while. The life jackets were to buy some time. If one fell in, the other ones could run home and get us, and they probably wouldn't drown. I'm pretty sure that any future new grandchildren that we get, those parents aren't going to allow that. I'm pretty sure that won't be allowed. But I didn't do much fishing, so I love this picture of me. I'm sure I didn't catch a single fish on that stick, but I'm liking to pose with the fish and claim like I did. And then even the big boys, this is just a couple of years ago. These boys are old, and I think they're catching crawdads. I don't know what they're doing.
They cooked them and ate them too.
Oh, they cooked them and ate them that day. Okay. All right. I didn't think the hammock had been around for that long, because that's really only, I feel, maybe 30 years we've had a hammock. But I did come across a picture of my grandfather, and that's the summer after my mother was born, relaxing in a hammock in the front yard. So I guess hammocks have kind of woven throughout the decades.
That could be your mother.
Yeah, it is my mother. Yeah. But Pris, what is on her hand? She's got some kind of a brace on her hand.
They put gloves here so you couldn't suck your thumb.
Oh, well, there you go. She's not sucking her thumb, so it must be working. So we leave the 90s and we head into the 2000s. This was a time now when all of, can't call them the grandchildren because that was Pris's generation. This would be my children's generation. And they're now all becoming teenagers and rowdy and swimming and doing crazy things. These are 2 cousins. This is my son and my sister's daughter. And they just look forward every year to being able to get together and spend time at the lake. We all live far apart. And so the lake is kind of a place where we come together and celebrate. Of course, they do not like when we make them pose for their photos. We make them pose for the annual photos on the slide, on the steps, on the whatever. Oh, we don't know if you're going to be together later this summer, so let's get the pictures now. And now they are so old that this was last summer, they're trying to reenact this photo. They humor us for a few moments, and then they scurry on their merry way. Now off to play beer pong, pretty much. I don't think I have to say much about 4th of July because every single person in this room knows about 4th of July at the lake. That's kind of our, almost better than Christmas in my view. This is a fantastic picture from the late from like 1929. And those are sparklers, little tiny shadows of people that you can see. It actually is not at 4th of July, it's at Decoration Day. And so some people may not know what Decoration Day is, but Decoration Day was a precursor to Memorial Day, where you would go out and decorate the cemeteries for the fallen soldiers of the Civil War. And they celebrated with sparklers. I did not know that until just I was looking it up. We always had picnics, and we still have picnics, and we still have hamburgers, and now we have sweet corn Charlie corn. We still pose for pictures, and we can't wait for fireworks at the end of the big night. This is kind of what I would like to do now. This is all I want to do now, is just float around. Somebody who has an entrepreneurial spirit should bring back these old little floating chairs. They were the best. They survived for many decades. We only just got rid of the last one recently, but they were great. They last much longer than these little inflatable things that get holes in them. But anyway, oh, there's Bill McCumber. This is Marty's father right there on that little floaty thing. I'll have to show you this, Marty, later, up close. So then we come into the 2010s. This is me on the road grader that I found on the way into North Webster one night with my husband, which was just a crazy story, which I won't tell you about. If anybody knows a guy named Larry Jernigan, that's him. And he was selling wood, and we found this covered in weeds, and we asked him if we could buy it. And he said yes, and it made it to our house a week or two before the first annual Adams reunion of 2000, which was in 2013. So the reason I call it Run a Tight Ship is probably that's what my nieces and nephews and my kids would call it. They think I'm a little bit of a tyrant. My sister and I share the house now, but I tend to be the property manager, and I'm a little bit controlling, and I tend to make a lot of rules. So, but you know, it's not going to run easily unless somebody's doing all that hard work. One thing I like about the lake is that the kids are away from their, you know, tablets, and television is rarely on, and we just managed to make our own fun. We do have kind of a musical group here. I don't know too many other family reunions that one of the nights is a talent show, and pretty much everybody participated. So that's my nephews / cousins. They're really cousins, but I'm going to call them nephews, playing the guitar. And this is my sister and I in the 60s doing our little dance routine for our parents. We haven't talked about boats. Clearly, obviously, boats are a big theme here. Irv mentioned the Chris Crafts that we had, and this is one of the original Tinker toys that he was probably talking about. This is a photo actually from Macy's slip that has been published. It isn't in the scrapbook. And this is the people on that boat, including young Janet McCumber and Oni and my grandmother Janet. We really only have a couple of names that we use over and over again. Oh, I didn't say at the beginning that after my mother, oh, I forgot to say this part. At the very beginning, when I told you the very tragic story of the car accident, and my mother was not at the lake where she was supposed to be because she was in labor with me in Northwest Indiana. And I was born the very next morning after that tragic accident. And they called the McCumber family and said, or they called Oni, I think, and asked if it would be okay if they changed the name from Catherine to Marianne in honor of Marianne. So yeah, again, another name that's just kind of gets used around. So anyway, I'm glad this is Tinker Toy 4. This is the boat that this whole crew grew up with in the 60s. We learned to ski behind that boat. And I'm just glad that we now have a pontoon boat, which is way easier on many levels. And it's good for the cocktail cruising. So besides the big boats, we also had little boats. And kids had a lot more freedom back on the little boats in the olden days. I remember this is shortly after we got We 3, which was a 3.5 horsepower motor. My mom looks like she's training me how to drive it, but she had no problem sending me off to the public library through the channel. Now, you know how long it takes to get from Vaughter Park across the entire lake, through the channel, across Syracuse Lake, dock at that public pier, walk with a big bag of books to the thing when you're only 8 years old in a 3.5 horsepower boat, and then go all the way back home. That's how she got rid of me for 6 hours, I think. All she said was, if you have any problems on the boat or you break down, just row. We had oars in there to keep ourselves safe. Row up to somebody's pier and ask them to call. And nobody thought anything twice about it. No cell phones. The little young ones today are just shocked about that. So that kind of takes us up through the present day. And here we are today, the beginning of the 2020s. It's a bit of a stormy beginning to this decade. We hope it passes very quickly, kind of like the hurricane season. But my husband and I were here walking in this very place 2 weeks ago, and I snapped this photo over there along the road. And of course, that's a COVID. That's the elusive coronavirus plant growing right here on our property here. And so it wasn't Wuhan, it was right here in Wawasee. That's where it started. So I know that we all hope that this passes and that next year we're not sitting at presentations wearing masks. But basically, all the time that I spent thinking about this presentation, the most important thing to take away is that it's not the house. It's not even the people. The people have changed. I don't even know some of the people that were there in the 30s and 40s. I know them through their spirit. I know them through their stories. I don't know them personally. And that is because we just have had the same stuff forever. We've had the same activities. We've had the same furniture. We've had the same memories. We've had shared memories. I get great comfort in knowing that my children grew up sleeping in the beds that I slept in as a child in the sailboat room, that my mother and Pris slept in as children in the sailboat room. And it's especially in this time when things are just crazy, it's a real grounding feeling to have that connection. And for people that have been in their cottages for a long time, you know that, you have that. And that's why that's why you encourage your family. You want to protect your cottage for that. If you're a new family with a new cottage, this is what you have to look forward to over the years. Keep your families close. Keep your cottage as a gathering place where everybody looks forward to spending time. I didn't know I was going to find these photos with this little child set, which is over at the McCumber house. And the interesting thing about this set of photos, this is Pris and Marshall, which is Lori and Janny's father. He's one of the younger McCumbers. This is my first birthday party. That's me. This is Pris, pregnant with my cousin Jimmy, standing in the background. And then this is Pris's 2 of her grandchildren. Many decades later, 2 of Pris's grandchildren eating snacks while it looks like the bigger kids are sitting at the bigger table. So it just is astonishing to me that we've been able to keep that going. And I view that as, I take that job very seriously whenever things are changing at the cottage, that it's important to protect the legacy of my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents and what they wanted for us. And I like to think that Oni and Roy would be very proud of the way our families have handled things and would be shocked that so many of their descendants still spend so much time and want to spend so much time here. I think they would be very, very happy. But most importantly, at this point in our family's legacy and history, we have these 2, Pris and Marshall. They're our last remaining of that generation. They're both, I don't think Pris minds me saying, over 80 years old. And they have been coming here their entire lives as children, as teenagers, as young married couples, raising their families, and now, now enjoying their grandchildren and soon to be great-grandchildren. I look up to these 2 very much, and I just want to thank them. My parents died young, and Pris and Marshall have always been there for me as when I've asked for guidance and wisdom and stories, and they're the ones that know the stories of my family. And there's not too many people that have known you your whole 60 years of your life. If you think about it, it's only people older than you that are still alive. So I just want to honor Pris and my Uncle Marshall, and I love you both. And thank you for sitting here through this whole thing, Priscilla. And that is all I have for you. Yes, Irv? I omitted something.
Great presentation, but you omitted the time of extreme stress
When was that?
between our families. This was in the 1960s.
They might not have told me about that.
And we were sailing.
Oh,
And
oh,
Bill McCumber was at the tiller of
okay.
the train. And we were over by Ogden Island, and we came about and got caught in chains, which means we couldn't come all the way about, and we capsized.
Oh,
That was the first time that a Deister sailboat had ever capsized.
oh.
That is a black mark.
I was,
That I'm sure is not on your wall.
now wait, so that was in the 60s, was that? So you're not, so did you sail against this PCAT? And did we beat you?
By the way, you had a sea scow, which was called Bottoms Up.
I don't remember that one.
Bottoms Up.
Oh, you probably beat that one. Well, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know there was a time of stress. I've only known it was a lot of good times. So thank you all for coming. Ann, do you crazy that we both had little models from these little manufacturing companies. Okay, Ann, you can wrap it up here.
Okay,
Oh, does she need this?
either Mindy or Irv to come up, please, and Marty and Chris. And Mary Ann, you stay here too.
Okay, do you want that?
Okay. Okay, as a token of our appreciation, we from the Syracuse Wawasee Historical Museum, we have Centennial Families and Centennial Home plaques. And Pris, since you're the matriarch of the Adams family, I'll put it that way, and hang in there. And Marty, okay, for your Centennial Home. Thank you so much. And let's see, I have to keep the Deisters last. Sorry, there's a reason.
Par for the course.
And Mary Ann, yours could be a family or a home, and we'll talk about that later.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And this particular Centennial Home plaque for the Deisters has something else that comes with it. Mindy, yeah, new car, right. See the keys, that doesn't look like a car. Mindy used to have to come down to our house to pick up the keys to the Deister house. And I would always see these just in our extra key box. And I thought that it needed to come back to your house. I've never tried it in any of your locks. There you go. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Thank you all.
You mentioned Alvin Stroll.
Yes. Did he do
Uncle
yours?
Alvin to our family. He was my Uncle Art's closest friend.
Really?
Uncle
That's
Alvin,
the
we call
architect that I talked to. Did
Yeah.
he do, oh, but he didn't design your cottage.
No.
Oh, that's
No.
crazy.
No, Frank might really do it.
Did he really?
No.
Oh, no. Now we have increased the value by a
It's
ton.
the prairie style.
It is the fairy style, and we just increased the value if we say that.
Well, they're wrapping things up. I'd like to wrap it up. And thank you so much all for coming. The gals did a wonderful job with their visuals. And I think Irv did a wonderful job with his word painting. He didn't need pictures. we have them in our mind.
Well,
And
I've taken a lot of abuse.
Oh, well, and you know, so many of us grew up this way. And I think we see our children it's still going. You know, the things have to come off the pier. They have to come in the house if it's going to rain. A lot of those things sounded so familiar to all of our families too. I'd like, and we wouldn't have all of this without Bill. We have no idea what he's been doing, but he certainly understands every bit of it. And thanks, Bill, so very, very much.
We didn't know we were going to have a Zoom component.
Right. And I'd like to thank the museum board members. They all showed up and they were very helpful, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you so very, very much, really. And we invite you all to come up and come to the museum Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 2. You'll find lots of interesting things to look at. And we don't get taxpayer money. It's all donations, grants, that type of thing. So we're just very pleased to accept any of those from you too. And just come and enjoy yourself at the museum. And it's very well air conditioned. We're always looking for volunteers. If you know somebody that has a little extra time on their hands up here, that's kind of hard to do sometimes because we've got a lot of responsibilities with our families. But come on up and we can find something for you to do. And thank you all so much for coming. This is what makes the Syracuse Wawasee area, is families like this. And I know that all of us here are hoping and praying that the next generation and the next generation continue to come and enjoy. So thank you all so very, very much for coming. It was a delight. Thank you. Oh, that was just so much of that. It's like, oh, yes.
See, it's the same thing.
It is. It really is. Fantastic.
You can insert anybody's last name into that.
Yeah, really, that's true.
Give
Yes.
names to pictures.
And I was looking at a lot of those pictures saying, oh, we got a picture that kind of looks like